So to anybody who knows me or knew me growing up, they knew that I loved Rugrats. It was my all-time favorite show as a kid, and I still hold a very special place in my heart for it now. Because as a kid, I appreciated the simplicity of the baby's adventures, or the fantasy in the baby's adventures. And now, as an adult, aside from appreciating the simplicity, I appreciate the fact that what the babies see isn't exactly what it seems to be. And the contrast that's presented of that is really, really funny. So, you can imagine my excitement when the feature-length movie, the Rugrats movie, was announced the year before the film came out. And sure enough, I went to see the movie, and I wasn't sure exactly what I thought of it back then, right after I'd gotten out of it. I came to realize that I not only loved this movie, but it's one of the best animated movies I've seen outside of Disney. Or maybe, at least that's in my view. I can understand if plenty of other people don't have that take. But there's a reason why this is the first animated movie outside of Disney to gross over $100 million at the box office. This movie was a big hit at the time that it came out, and it does, in my opinion, earn that. Here's the plot. Tommy and his friends are excited about the fact that he's going to be getting a new baby sister very soon, and sure enough, on the day of the baby shower, Tommy's mom, Dee Dee, ends up giving birth to the baby. However, the baby is instead a boy, played by who they named Dil. Get it? Dil Pickles. And he's a selfish little thing that constantly hogs away all the attention from Tommy's parents, from him, and ends up being a handful to deal with. Tommy is not as receptive to Dil either. However, when his father Stu gives him an inspirational speech about trying to be a good big brother, Tommy knows he has to do just that. So when the rest of the babies, Phil, Lil, and Chucky, mostly Phil and Lil, decide to use Stu's latest invention, the Reptar Wagon, to transport Dil back to the hospital so that they can return him. Tommy protests the idea, and as a result of an altercation, they end up in the wagon, going down the streets, having to avoid cars and trucks until eventually ending up, or other obstacles, until eventually ending up in the forest, stranded with nothing around but animals and trees. Meanwhile, Angelica discovers that Dil took her Cynthia doll, and she takes off with Spike to try and locate the babies just for the purpose of getting her doll back. Thus, a crazy search for the babies, as well as the babies trying to figure out how to deal with Dil, as well as fight amongst themselves while trying to get home. Can they get it together, and can they make it? Will the babies be forever lost to the adults? So, yeah, if you know Rugrats, you know that Rugrats is often very light and fluffy. Its humor often revolving around the babies misunderstanding things, or, at least from an adult's perspective, or the other thing is that the babies would make jokes that were usually revolved around toilet-related things. And, yeah, you get the fair amount of that here, but this movie tonally does not quite match the series, if you ask me. So, yeah, this movie certainly does take a darker edge that's not expected, and I think it feels like it has more stakes. And I think that kind of works to its benefit. As a kid, I was maybe off-put because I usually you see the babies fight like this, it's never to the really hard-hitting and, like, uncompromising way that this does it. And there is some surprising symbolism in this movie, too, if you think about it. I mean, the external situation is, as opposed to this, an actual physical setup of what they would usually have a fantasy about the circumstances they're in. In this case, they're not imagining they're lost in a forest in the middle of nowhere with no one to depend on but themselves. They really are. Or it's not that they conceive it, but it is actually that. So it's an even bigger stake in their minds for that reason. Not to mention the fact that they have a vicious lone wolf chasing after them. Scar Snout, I believe the wiki called him, but may not be the actual name that he was supposed to have. Anyways, well, I don't say that he's the same as the shark in Jaws. I mean, like, kids could probably liken him to that. An unrelenting monster who just won't stop no matter what, and wants to kill and eat innocent babies. That's pretty brutal. I mean, granted, it never goes that far, like it's a surprise, but at the same time, just the fact that a Nickelodeon movie, a Rugrats movie, the first Rugrats movie, would have that implication, it's terrifying. And I kind of also relate to this on a personal level that, well, I'm somebody who also has a little brother, much like Tommy, and yeah, I can understand the frustration, but at the same time, there is a bond between the two, and you see that in this movie. And Dil, I know a lot of fans, Rugrats fans, didn't like him, but I always just thought he was the most freaking adorable little thing. And yeah, well, it's odd that as a newborn, he can kind of think on the same level of the babies, but can't communicate on the same level of the babies. I feel like that's not exactly consistent, and they don't really give a good explanation of that. But then again, they don't ever really explain why Angelica, 3-year-olds who can talk to adults, can also talk to the babies. So, I mean, there's the Rugrats theory, but we don't talk about that. So, yeah, I can understand why the next movie would end up leaning more towards the humor as opposed to the darker elements, because that seemed to be more what Rugrats fans would gravitate towards with these movies. Now, is it a perfect film? Certainly not, but I loved it back then, and I certainly do love it now. I see a lot of value in the way that the movie doesn't pull its punches, the way that it does get pretty dark, that it does get sad, and it offers you the chance to be emotional, and yeah, you definitely don't mind taking that chance because you are invested in these characters. You care about these characters, you care about what's happening to them. So I hope you take that for what it's worth, and you'll enjoy that this wild ride is something that's worth remembering and worth checking out. Hang on to your diapers, babies. We're going in.